Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Hebrews. Every high priest chosen from among mortals is put in charge of things pertaining to God on their behalf, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is subject to weakness. And because of this, he must offer sacrifice for his own sins as well as for those of the people. And one does not presume to take this honor, but takes it only when called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself in becoming a high priest, but was appointed by the one who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to the one who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered, and having been made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him. Having been designated by God a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. Holy wisdom, holy word.
The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark from the 10th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus, and they said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You don't know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with?" And they replied, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink, and the baptism with which I'm baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it's for the one whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it's not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You know, I've had that question before, and usually it's a loaded question. You know, when somebody comes up to you and said, "Can you do me a favor?" And you look at them and say, "Okay, what? Can you do me a favor, Jesus?" "Yeah, what do you want me to do?" I could just see Jesus' face. And then, just like every 12-year-old, of course, I was 12 years old when I first heard this, but I lived a sheltered life in southern Ohio. But every 12-year-old, boy or girl, as soon as they get to the car, they yell, "Shotgun!" You ever done that? You ever done that? You know the reason why we use that term shotgun? You know the lore behind it? The reason is the stagecoach. Stagecoach driver would sit on the left, and then right beside the stagecoach driver was the man who had the shotgun. He's the man with the power. He's the man with the guns. And he's the one who's able to keep the bandits at bay and keep the people protected. So it's a seat of prestige and power and authority. So whenever the kids yell it, they want to sit in the front seat beside the driver, because that's the place of prestige. That's the place we don't get to sit. And law says now, of course, that you don't get to sit up front until you're a certain age or a certain size, a certain weight. So, but the rule is this. Remember this always. Now, Mary, you remember this with Tom, too. The rule is this with shotgun. You're not allowed to yell it unless you see the car. So if you're opening the door and you yell shotgun, it doesn't count. It only counts whenever you see the car. It's in eye shot. But these guys, literally, I mean, it's funny that we talk about shotgun, sitting shotgun. But it's that ridiculous that they ask Jesus to have the place of authority. Jesus tells them, it's not my job to give that to you. It's not my right to give it to you. It's given to the one who's prepared for it. And Jesus, of course, is the one prepared for it. We know that from the creeds. He's seated at the right hand of the Father. We know that he is the one who's been prepared for that. But when James and John come to Jesus and they ask this, they really don't know what they're asking. As a matter of fact, in Mark's gospel, they never, ever, ever get it. None of the disciples get it. They don't know who they're following exactly because they think they're following this great leader who's going to rise up with arms, who's going to take Rome by force, and who's going to establish God's kingdom with a sword. They know this is going to happen because this is the way it's always done. And when Jesus doesn't do it by the end of Mark's gospel, they run away from the tomb with fear. Something has happened and they don't understand it. Jesus says to them today, you will drink of the cup that I drink from. You will be baptized with the same baptism that I have. Meaning that they will drink of the same life that he has. The same life of living day after day, suffering and dying. That they will be baptized with that same baptism that calls them to a life of following God and giving themselves forever to God, even to that moment whenever they finally give their last breath. These are words for us as well. That's the reason why I say it's such a dangerous thing that we gather at the baptismal font with babies. We're saying exactly that same thing with a baby when we bring them to that baptismal font. We're saying this baby is going to be put in harm's way. This baby is going to have a life of suffering. This baby is going to live exactly the way that Jesus lived his life, even to crucifixion. We say that. Do you really want to baptize your babies? Of course we do. Of course we do. Because we know suffering comes with this life. But we also know that the one who led the road to suffering is the one who achieved salvation for us. And we know that that one who achieved salvation for us is the one who stands before James and John and says, you will. He's not saying, watch out what you ask for. He's saying, I know what this life is about. I know that this life is difficult. I know in this life there will be sufferings. And he's saying it to all of us as much as he's saying it to James and John, because he turns around and he looks at the disciples and says, the first must be last and you must be servant of all. Because that's the way he lived his life. But this is not somehow, I don't know, what the word I'm looking for is, it's not somehow a drudgery. It's that we get to be part of this kingdom. We get to be part of God's own body and blood through Jesus Christ. We get to be part of the hands and feet of Jesus because we know that it is this wonderful gift that's given to the world. And somehow, through Jesus Christ, we've been empowered to help others to receive that gift by sharing it with them over and over and over and over. Now, I don't know how many times you've shared that gift with others, but is it easy? No, it's not. Some days it's stinky. Some days it's just nasty and messy. Some days, why in the world am I doing this? But every day it's, thank God that God has done this for me. Thank God that God has done this for you. God has given you all that you need, your salvation, your life itself, the breath that you breathe. And God continues to do that through Jesus Christ, who has come to us. And he promises this to James and John, not as, well, since you're going to follow me, I'm going to curse you, but simply as a prediction of what life is like. What life is like following Jesus is not easy. It doesn't have all the answers, and that gets us, but it's certainly worth it, because Jesus says that in the end, we will all be resurrected with him, and we will live with him forever. You know, I was thinking about this past week, especially as Galen died and Ray Hussey died. And Galen always sat back here about where Audrey is sitting now. He always sat back there in the past couple of years because of his oxygen. And if there's anyone who exemplified what it's like to suffer, it was Galen, because he carried that, and I'm sure he really loved carrying that oxygen around, but he carried that oxygen around with him, and he sat back there and could not walk up here to communion because it wore him out. As a matter of fact, a couple of times he almost passed out because he walked up here. It wasn't easy for him, but he knew it was worth it. And his family knew it was worth it as well, because they knew that in the end, and even through the suffering, God was still there. God was still accomplishing something through Galen. And God continues to do that through us as well, each one of us. Amen.